Everyone called it an accident. Poirot disagreed. Welcome to Cafe Echoes. I'm your host, Silas Graves. Tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from. I'm grateful you're here. Let's uncover the truth. The winter light lay thin and brittle over Hercule Poirot, and the truth disguised as an accident, turning the great house's windows into pale mirrors and the gravel drive into a ribbon of crushed glass. Even before one reached the portico, the place announced itself as an emblem of order, hedges clipped to severe geometry, a fountain stilled to a perfect basin, the front door flanked by lamps that matched with almost militaristic precision. It was precisely such order, I reflected, that makes disorder seem so obscene when it finally arrives. We had come down from London at the request of Lady Marjorie Vale, whose note, written in a firm, upright hand, had been brief and oddly careful. A terrible accident, she had written. Yet there are circumstances that trouble me. I cannot, in conscience, dismiss them. You will understand why I ask for discretion. Poirot had read the letter twice, smoothing it with the flat of his palm as though to iron out its anxieties. Then he had looked at me, Captain Hastings, lately returned from a dreary luncheon with a colonel who collected bitterness as other men collect stamps, and his eyes had brightened with that familiar, contained excitement. An accident that troubles the conscience, he had murmured. Ah, mon ami, already I smell it, like the faint perfume that lingers in a room after the lady has gone. Something has passed. Something remains. Now, and as our motor drew up and the butler, an elderly man with the correct expression of practiced calm, received us, I noticed the first crack in the facade, a faint tremor in his fingers as he took Poirot's hat, and the way his eyes went past us, as if watching some invisible commotion in the hall. Lady Marjorie met us not in the drawing-room but in the morning library, as though the daylight might serve as a witness. She was a tall woman, handsomely preserved, her pearl earrings steady points of brightness. Only her mouth betrayed her. It was set with the rigidity of one who has spent the night repeating a sentence to herself until it becomes a prayer. Monsieur Poirot, she said. Captain Hastings. Thank you. Poirot bowed with grave courtesy. Madame, it is always a sadness when I am invited to a house because the peace has departed from it. Her eyes flickered just once to the closed door behind her, and I caught the faintest sound beyond it, a low murmur as of restrained voices. He is dead, she said, and the words seemed to scrape. My stepson, Cyril Vale. I had expected an illness, perhaps, or one of those sudden collapses that take men in middle age. But Lady Marjorie's next sentence struck with the sharpness of a snapped string. He fell down the stairs. There are accidents which, even when described plainly, arrive in the mind with a grotesque clarity. The angle of a body, the sickening inevitability of gravity, the sound, imagined or remembered, of impact. I felt my stomach tighten. Poirot, however, did not move, and he stood as though he were a little statue placed there for contemplation, his eyes attentive, his moustaches immaculate, even in tragedy. And yet, he said softly, you do not believe it is so simple. Lady Marjorie did not answer at once. She crossed to the window and touched the curtain with 2 fingers, as though confirming it was real. Then she spoke, without turning. Cyril was difficult, brilliant in bursts, careless between them. He quarreled with people the way other men breathe. He had, I suppose, many enemies, certainly many who disliked him. She inhaled, and for a moment her composure faltered. But he was not clumsy. He did not fall, not like that. Poirot's head inclined a fraction. Tell me, madame, who was in the house? Lady Marjorie turned now, and as she did the door behind her opened an inch. A young woman, pretty, tense, her cheeks too pale for youth, peered in and then withdrew when she saw we were occupied. Her glance had been quick, searching, almost hungry. Lady Marjorie continued, We are a small party. My husband is abroad, At present we have Miss Eleanor Shaw, my companion." She nodded toward the door through which the girl had vanished. "And Dr. Alistair Fenwick, who was here for the weekend. Cyril's intended, Miss Rosamond Lee, arrived yesterday. There is also Mr. Gerard Pike, Cyril's solicitor. He came to discuss certain matters and stayed the night because of the snow. The staff are few: Baines the butler, cook, and 2 maids." Poirot repeated the names under his breath as if tasting them. "And the authorities?" "The local inspector has been here, Inspector Bryce. He is satisfied." Her voice sharpened on the word. He says it is a misstep, a loose slipper, a wet tread. He says Cyril had been drinking. He says there is no sign of struggle. He wishes, quite kindly, to spare a scandal." Poirot spread his hands in a gesture of polite apology to the world. "And you, madame, you do not wish to be spared. You wish to be certain." "Exactly." At that moment, the murmuring beyond the door grew louder, then stopped abruptly. The door opened fully, and a man entered, broad-shouldered with the heavy confidence of an accustomed authority. His eyes, however, held irritation rather than grief. "Lady Marjorie," he began, then stopped when he saw Poirot. "Ah, so you've sent for him." "Inspector Bryce," Lady Marjorie said evenly. "Monsieur Poirot is here at my request." Inspector Bryce's mouth tightened. "Well, I hope he enjoys country hospitality. But the matter is settled." Poirot smiled with exquisite sweetness. "Monsieur l'Inspecteur, it is true. I enjoy hospitality very much. But I enjoy also the truth. And sometimes the truth, like a little cat, hides itself in the most comfortable chair." Inspector Bryce snorted. "The truth is a broken neck at the foot of the stairs." Poirot's eyes, bright as polished buttons, held his. "And perhaps," he said, "it is also something that wished very much to look like a broken neck at the foot of the stairs." A silence fell, delicate as frost. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimed once, an impatient, solitary note. Lady Marjorie lifted her chin. "Monsieur Poirot will see the stairs," she said, "and then he will speak to everyone." Poirot nodded, and as he did I felt that familiar sensation, half admiration, half unease, that comes when one realizes the game has begun and that the pieces upon the board are human hearts. "Très bien," Poirot said softly. "Let us go, then, to the place where the accident happened." Poirot did not hurry, and in that deliberate pace there was something that nettled Inspector Bryce. We crossed the hall, cold with unused grandeur, where a black-draped mirror returned our figures like a rebuke. Ahead, the staircase rose wide and courteous, its oak banister polished to a soft gleam. I had expected some obvious sign of violence. Instead, there was only a small dark patch on the runner midway down, an ugly little punctuation mark on an otherwise correct sentence. "There," said Lady Marjorie. "He was found at the bottom. Baines heard the fall." Poirot's eyes travelled over the stairs as though they were a page he meant to read aloud. "And when was this, madame?" "Last night, a little after 11. Supper ended, Cyril went to his study. Later, there was a crash. Baines found him." Bryce broke in. "Everyone's movements were checked. Vale had whiskey in him, slipped. That's the whole story." Poirot's hand hovered above the stain. He blotted it once with a white handkerchief and raised the cloth to his nose. "Brandy," he said. "Spilled from the glass when he fell," Bryce snapped. "Or spilled before," Poirot returned gently. "Was a glass found here?" "A decanter and tumbler in the study. His prints. Nothing irregular." Poirot did not argue. He climbed, one step at a time, his fingers resting lightly on the banister, and halfway up he stopped at the brass rod that held the runner. With 2 neat motions he tested it, then pressed the carpet with his palm. "Hastings," he said, "observe. The rod is firm, the runner does not slip." It lay taut, edged and tucked with the proud care of a well-run house. An accident could happen, of course, but it would have to be a very particular kind. He descended again and stood at the foot of the stairs where the newel post rose. "Here," he said, touching the polished wood. The hand would grasp. "Yes?" His finger traced a faint smeared line, visible unless one looked for it. "Wax," he decided, "from a candle. And yet you told me the lamps were lit. Curious." He glanced at Bryce. "Where was the body taken?" "To the billiard room," Bryce said shortly. "Doctor." Fenwick examined him there. At the landing, Lady Marjorie indicated a door to the right. "Cyril's study." Poirot paused on the threshold. The room was orderly in the way of a man who wishes to appear orderly. Papers squared, books aligned, the desk blotter set to the edge. Yet the air held a faint sense of recent disturbance, as if someone had hurried to make disorder look respectable. A decanter of whiskey stood on a side table with a single tumbler and a shallow amber residue. The fire burned low. The curtains were drawn. Poirot went not to the drink but to the hearthrug. He bent and pointed with one finger. A scuff, here and here. Not large, a slipper that turns. Bryce exhaled sharply. "People walk, Poirot." "Certainly," said Poirot, "but sometimes they hesitate, sometimes they retreat." He straightened and looked at the desk. "May I see what occupied Mr. Vale?" "Solicitor matters," Bryce said. "Mr. Pike can explain." Poirot opened a drawer with the lightest pressure and drew out a sheaf tied with blue ribbon. He did not read a word. He examined only the knot. Tight, competent, recently pulled. Then replaced it exactly as he found it. Footsteps sounded in the corridor. Miss Eleanor Shaw appeared with a tray. The teapot trembled slightly in her hands. Her face was pale, her eyes too bright. "Lady Marjorie," she said, "I thought Monsieur Poirot might like tea." Poirot's expression softened into charm. "Mademoiselle, you are kindness itself. You see, Hastings, even in sorrow, England makes tea." Eleanor's mouth shaped a small, grateful smile, but it vanished as her eyes flicked toward the stairwell. "It was awful," she whispered. The sound, like something heavy thrown down. "You heard it?" Poirot asked. "I was in my room. I came out and Baines was already running." She swallowed. "Miss Lee was in the corridor too. She said she had been looking for Cyril." Lady Marjorie's lips tightened. "Rosamond is distraught." "Distraught people," Poirot said softly, "sometimes move in interesting ways." Bryce folded his arms. "If you're thinking the fiancé pushed him, forget it." She was sobbing like a child. Poirot's gaze remained on Eleanor. "Mademoiselle Shaw, when Miss Lee said she was looking for Mr. Vale, did she say why?" Eleanor hesitated. The pause was tiny, yet it seemed to shift the air in the room. She said he had promised to sign something, tonight, before the post. "A document," Poirot murmured. "And did he sign it?" "I don't know," Eleanor said quickly, Auntie staring at the tray. Poirot accepted his cup and sipped as though tasting not tea but the shape of the answer. "Merci," he said. Then he turned to Lady Marjorie and, with perfect politeness, to Inspector Bryce. "Now we must gather our little circle. I wish to speak with each alone, not only to the words," and his moustaches lifted a fraction, "but to what the words try so hard to conceal." Lady Marjorie complied at once, summoning the household with the quiet authority of one accustomed to obedience. The morning library became, in a short time, a kind of drawing-room court, though grief hung over it like a veil. Poirot insisted upon speaking to each person separately, and Inspector Bryce, though visibly impatient, remained, perhaps out of pride, perhaps because he could not bear to be excluded. The first to enter was Dr. Alistair Fenwick. He was a lean man with an intelligent, rather weary face, and the professional calm of one who has seen death too often to dramatize it. "You examined Mr. Vale?" Poirot asked. I did. A broken neck. Death instantaneous. Poirot nodded. No sign of struggle. Fenwick's eyes narrowed. A fall can kill cleanly. The angle was unfortunate. And yet, Poirot said softly, you are not entirely convinced. Fenwick's mouth tightened. Lady Marjorie's doubts are contagious, Monsieur Poirot. But if you ask my medical opinion, there was bruising on the forearm, possibly from striking the banister as he fell. Possibly, Poirot echoed, or from being held. Inspector Bryce made an impatient sound. Fenwick lifted one shoulder. I cannot say more without inventing. Poirot's gaze sharpened. Was Mr. Vale intoxicated? He had been drinking, yes, not insensible, but enough to dull balance. Poirot thanked him with courtesy and dismissed him. When Fenwick had gone, Poirot remained still for a moment, as if placing the doctor's words into an invisible arrangement. Next came Mr. Gerard Pike, the solicitor. He was a neat man, smooth-haired, with the guarded eyes of someone who keeps other people's secrets for a living. His gloves were in his hand, though indoors. Monsieur Poirot, he began, I understand this is unofficial. Unofficial, yes, Poirot said, but truth does not require official stamps. Tell me, Mr. Pike, why were you here? To discuss Mr. Vale's affairs. He wished to make changes. Lady Marjorie's fingers tightened on the arm of her chair. Poirot noticed. Changes, he repeated. Now to a will. Pike hesitated just long enough to be noticeable. Among other documents. Poirot leaned forward. And were these documents signed last night? No, Pike said quickly. Mr. Vale postponed. He said he was tired. And yet Miss Lee was looking for him, Poirot murmured. Because he promised to sign. Pike's eyes flickered. Miss Lee was eager. She believed marriage should not proceed without clarity. Inspector Bryce interjected. The will leaves everything to Lady Marjorie if Cyril dies unmarried. That's your clarity. Lady Marjorie's face flushed with indignation. Inspector, Poirot raised a hand. Calm, calm. Motive is not guilt, it is only possibility. He turned back to Pike. Did Mr. Vale fear anyone? Pike's expression became cautious. He had quarrels, but fear? No, Cyril Vale feared nothing, as that was his trouble. Poirot dismissed him. The solicitor left with the same careful tread, as though walking across thin ice. Then Rosamond Lee entered. She was striking rather than pretty, with dark hair arranged impeccably and eyes that seemed too controlled for a woman in mourning. Yet her hands betrayed her. They twisted together at her waist. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice low, you think Cyril was murdered? I think, Poirot replied gently, that someone wishes us to believe in an accident. Rosamond's lips parted. It was an accident. He was reckless. He drank. Her voice faltered, and suddenly tears sprang up, startling in their abruptness. He was going to marry me. Poirot watched her, not unkindly. And yet you came into the corridor last night, looking for him. Yes, she whispered. Because he was avoiding me. He promised to sign papers. He always postponed, always played with other people's lives. Anger flashed through grief. I wanted him to stop. You argued. We spoke sharply, but I left him in his study, alive. Poirot's eyes remained steady. At what time? A little after 10:30. And after that? Rosamond swallowed. I went to my room. I heard the crash. I ran out, that is all. Poirot inclined his head. Merci, mademoiselle. When she'd gone, Eleanor Shaw was called. She entered hesitantly, as though expecting rebuke. You were Lady Marjorie's companion, Poirot said. Yes. You have been here how long? 8 months. Poirot's voice was mild. And Mr. Vale, did he treat you kindly? A faint color rose in her cheeks. He noticed me too much sometimes. That he liked to provoke. To provoke? Poirot repeated softly. Did he provoke you last night? Eleanor's eyes darted. No, I hardly saw him. Poirot leaned back. Mademoiselle, you are frightened. She clasped her hands tightly. Everyone is frightened. Poirot's gaze sharpened like a needle. Not everyone. Only those who feel the floor is less solid than it appears. Eleanor's breath caught. I don't know what you mean. Poirot did not press further. He thanked her and let her go. At last, Baines the butler entered, stiff with propriety. Poirot questioned him carefully. The household's movements, the sound of the fall, the finding of the body. Baines answered precisely, yet Poirot's eyes narrowed when the man spoke of the candle. A candle, monsieur? No, we use only lamps in the hall. And yet, Poirot murmured, there is wax upon the banister. Baines' face did not change, but something in his throat moved. Perhaps from the chapel candles, monsieur. Sometimes, Poirot's voice was gentle as velvet. Sometimes someone carries a candle where they should not. When Baines left, Inspector Bryce exploded. This is absurd. Wax, bruises, quarrels, none of it proves murder. Poirot's smile was faint. No, monsieur, but it proves something more important. What? That in this house, everyone is telling the truth, except where it matters most. Poirot's last words hung in the air like a delicate threat. Inspector Bryce muttered something about foreign theatrics and strode toward the window, staring out at the frozen lawns as though the landscape might offer him a simpler explanation. Lady Marjorie remained seated, her composure fraying at the edges. Monsieur Poirot, she said quietly, you truly believe? Poirot's expression softened. Madame, I believe only that an accident is the easiest mask a crime may wear. The question is, who wished to dress it so? He rose and paced slowly, hands clasped behind his back. We have, as always, the triangle, motive, means, opportunity. But above all, we have psychology. The mind leaves fingerprints more clearly than the hand. Hastings, I confess, I felt a growing unease. Each person we had spoken to carried some private tension, some concealed angle. The house itself seemed full of secrets tucked neatly into drawers. Poirot turned abruptly. Lady Marjorie, I wish to see where Mr. Vale lay. The billiard room had been turned into a temporary chamber of death. The great table stood unused beneath its green lamp. Now Cyril Vale's body had been removed, but the air still held the faint metallic trace of tragedy. A rug had been rolled back, and the floorboards beneath showed a darker mark. Poirot stood over it in silence. Here, he murmured. The end of the fall. But tell me, Hastings, if a man falls headlong, what is the first thing he does? He throws out his arms, I said. Precisely. Poirot's eyes gleamed. The bruising on the forearm. Perhaps he did throw out his arm. Or perhaps he let the thought trail. Inspector Bryce reappeared in the doorway. You're wasting time. The coroner will come tomorrow. Poirot inclined his head politely. And yet time is what the murderer counts upon. Bryce snorted. You have no murderer. Poirot stepped closer, his voice gentle. Monsieur l'inspecteur, when you are certain too quickly, you become the accomplice of deception. Before Bryce could reply, footsteps hurried in the corridor. Eleanor Shaw appeared, breathless, her face strained. Lady Marjorie, Monsieur Poirot, there's something missing. Poirot's eyes sharpened instantly. Missing, mademoiselle? What is missing? Eleanor swallowed. The blue ribbon papers, the ones in Cyril's desk. I saw them this morning when you opened the drawer. Now, they're gone. A silence fell, heavy as snow. Inspector Bryce straightened. Gone? Are you sure? Yes. I was bringing fresh ink to the study. The drawer was open. Empty. Poirot's face remained calm, but I saw the quick spark of satisfaction in his eyes. Not pleasure, never that, but the recognition of movement on the board. Ah, he murmured. So, the game advances. Lady Marjorie rose sharply. Ah, who would dare? Poirot's voice was mild. Someone who fears what those papers contain. Bryce's impatience turned to anger. This is serious now. Pike, Fenwick, everyone back here at once. Within minutes, the morning library held the household again, but the atmosphere had changed. Suspicion now moved openly, no longer disguised as grief. Mr. Pike looked genuinely alarmed. The documents were legal drafts, if they are stolen. Rosamond's eyes flashed. Drafts that would have changed everything. Lady Marjorie's voice cut through. Rosamond! Rosamond turned, her control cracking. Do not pretend, Marjorie. Cyril was going to cut you off. He told me himself. Lady Marjorie's face went white. That is a lie. Poirot lifted a hand. Mes amis, please. We do not accuse without reason. Yet we see clearly now. These papers matter. Inspector Bryce glared around. Which of you went into that study after the death? Baines spoke stiffly. Only myself, sir, to lock the room. Fenwick said, I entered briefly, yes, to fetch my bag. Rosamond's chin lifted. I did not. Pike's voice was tight. Nor I. Eleanor whispered, I only went just now. Poirot's gaze moved from face to face like a lantern sweeping a dark corridor. The thief, he said softly, is also the one who panics. Bryce barked, We'll search rooms. Poirot's eyes narrowed. No, monsieur. Searching will only drive the truth deeper. Instead, he turned to Lady Marjorie. Madame, there is somewhere else I wish to see. The chapel. The small chapel lay at the far end of the east wing, seldom used except for Christmas hymns and funerals. Inside, the candles stood in brass holders, their wax dripped in hardened tears. Poirot approached the stand, touching one candle's base. He held up his finger. A smear of pale wax clung to it. Just as I thought, he murmured. Hastings. My mind raced. You think someone carried a candle into the hall? Poirot nodded. A candle is not needed in a lit corridor, unless one wishes the light to be softer. More uncertain. Shadows are very useful, mon ami. Behind us, a faint sound. A creak, a hurried retreat. Poirot's head snapped up, his eyes fixed on the half-open chapel door. Someone listens, he whispered. Without hesitation, Poirot strode forward and flung the door wide. The corridor beyond was empty, but at its far end a figure disappeared around the corner. A dark skirt, a flash of movement. Rosamond Lee's voice rang out sharply from behind. Eleanor. Poirot did not run. He merely smiled, a small, knowing curve. Now, he said softly, we begin to see who cannot bear to wait for the truth. Rosamond's cry echoed down the corridor, sharp with accusation. Eleanor Shaw appeared at once from the corner, her face flushed, her eyes wide with something between fear and indignation. I wasn't listening, she protested. I thought Lady Marjorie needed me. Poirot regarded her thoughtfully. Mademoiselle, in this house everyone thinks someone needs them. That is how secrets survive. Inspector Bryce pushed past, his boots loud on the polished floor. Enough of this. Miss Shaw, you will remain where I can see you. And the rest of you, back to the library. We are not finished. The household moved like reluctant pieces, drawn together by invisible force. As in the library, the fire crackled softly, an almost indecent comfort amid suspicion. Poirot stood apart, hands folded, while Bryce's temper filled the room. The documents are missing. Someone here took them. That makes this more than an accident. It makes it tampering with evidence. Pike's voice was strained. Inspector, those papers were not evidence. They were private legal matters. Rosamond's laugh was bitter. Private matters that decide who inherits, who is ruined, who is free. Lady Marjorie's eyes flashed. "Rosamond, you speak as though Cyril's death is an opportunity." Rosamond turned on her. "Isn't it? For you it certainly is." Poirot intervened gently. "Mesdames, please. Anger is understandable, but it clouds the little grey cells." He turned to Bryce. "Monsieur l'Inspecteur, you wish to search rooms. But before you do, allow me one question." His eyes moved to Baines. "The study was locked?" "Yes, monsieur," Baines replied stiffly. "After Dr. Fenwick and Inspector Bryce left, I locked it. The key remained on my ring." Poirot's head tilted. "Always on your ring?" "Always." "And yet," Poirot murmured, "the papers vanished, so either the lock was opened, or it was never truly locked." Baines' face tightened. "Are you suggesting—" Poirot raised a hand. "I suggest nothing. I observe." Bryce's patience snapped. "Observation won't recover documents. I'll have the servants' room searched first." Lady Marjorie stiffened. "Inspector, this is my house." "And there's been theft in it," Bryce retorted. Poirot's voice was calm. "Search if you must, but remember, the guilty party may welcome it. Disorder is sometimes a perfect hiding place." Bryce ignored him, as he barking orders. Cook was summoned, the maids questioned. The atmosphere grew thick with humiliation and resentment. Eleanor stood rigid, her hands clenched. Poirot moved quietly to Hastings and spoke under his breath. "You see, mon ami, the inspector believes force will make truth appear. But truth is shy. It prefers to be invited." I whispered back, "Do you think Eleanor took them?" Poirot's eyes remained on the girl. "I think she is frightened. But fear is not always guilt. Sometimes it is knowledge." The search produced nothing. Bryce returned, scowling. "No papers, no hidden drafts." "Nothing." Poirot nodded as though this confirmed rather than disappointed him. "Then perhaps the papers are not hidden in a room, but in a mind." At that moment, the sound of wheels crunched outside on the gravel. A motor car had arrived. Baines went to the door and returned with a telegram on a silver tray. "For you, Lady Marjorie." She took it, read, and her face changed, shock folding into something colder. "My husband," she said. "He is returning. He will be here tonight." Rosamond's voice was sharp. "Lord Vale, why now?" Lady Marjorie's fingers trembled slightly. "He says he has heard disturbing news." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Ah, disturbing news travels quickly." Inspector Bryce muttered, "More complication." Poirot turned to Lady Marjorie. "Madame, your husband's arrival may be most instructive. But until then, I wish to speak again with Miss Shaw, alone." Eleanor stiffened. "Why?" "Because," Poirot said softly, "you ran in the corridor, you were near the study, and someone called your name with anger." Rosamond's lips tightened. Lady Marjorie hesitated, then nodded. "That's very well." Eleanor followed Poirot into the small sitting room adjoining the library. The door closed. Through the glass panel, I could see Poirot's neat silhouette, the girl's tense posture. Minutes passed. The others waited, restless. Rosamond paced like a caged creature. Pike sat with his jaw clenched. Fenwick stared into the fire, as though seeking answers in embers. At last, the door opened. Eleanor emerged, her face pale, eyes shining with unshed tears. Poirot followed, grave. "Mademoiselle has told me something," he announced quietly. Bryce straightened. "What?" Poirot's gaze moved across them all. Last night, after Miss Lee left the study, Mr. Vale was not alone. A collective breath seemed to catch. Rosamond's voice was low. Who was with him? Poirot did not answer immediately. He lifted his hand as though weighing the moment. "Ah, Eleanor heard voices," he said. "A man's voice, Cyril's, and another, a whisper close, urgent, then silence. And after that, the fall." Lady Marjorie's face drained. Another voice. Yes, Poirot murmured, and that voice belongs to someone in this house. The room seemed to contract around us. Suspicion sharpened into something almost visible. Inspector Bryce's eyes narrowed. Name them. Poirot's smile was faint, almost sorrowful. Not yet, monsieur. Because the voice is only the beginning. The truth is disguised as an accident, but the disguise is slipping. Outside, the winter light faded toward evening, and somewhere in the house a door clicked softly, like the closing of a trap. The afternoon darkened early, as winter afternoons do, drawing long shadows through the corridors of Hercule Poirot, and the truth disguised as an accident. Their lamps were lit one by one, their glow softening the edges of suspicion, but not dispelling it. If anything, the dimness made each glance sharper, each silence heavier. Inspector Bryce remained in the library, refusing to leave as though his presence might hold the house together. Lady Marjorie sat upright, hands folded, her composure now a brittle shell. Rosamond watched everyone with the intensity of a hawk. Pike avoided her gaze entirely. Dr. Fenwick had retreated into professional detachment, yet even he looked unsettled. Poirot, meanwhile, seemed almost tranquil. He approached the decanter of whiskey that had been brought in, sniffed it delicately, and then set it aside with faint distaste. Always, he murmured. The drink. People think it explains everything. It explains nothing. It is only an excuse that sits conveniently on the table. Hastings, I whispered. You said the other voice belonged to someone here. Surely you must suspect. Poirot held up a finger. Suspect? Yes. Accuse? Never. The difference is vast. A sudden commotion came from the hall. Baines appeared, his face strained beneath propriety. Lady Marjorie, Lord Vale has arrived. The announcement struck the room like a bell. Lady Marjorie rose so quickly her chair scraped. Already? Baines bowed stiffly. His lordship's train was not delayed. Footsteps followed, measured, authoritative. A man entered, tall, grey-haired, with the stern dignity of an old soldier. His eyes swept the room, taking in Poirot, Inspector Bryce, the gathered faces. Marjorie, he said, his voice low. Then, more sharply, where is my son? Lady Marjorie's composure wavered. Stephen, Cyril is dead. For the first time, Lord Vale's face cracked. Something like disbelief flickered, quickly mastered. He turned away as though the room itself offended him. Inspector Bryce stepped forward. My lord, I am Inspector Bryce. We have concluded it was a tragic accident. Lord Vale's gaze snapped back. Accident? The word was cold. My son does not fall like a drunken fool. Poirot's eyes gleamed faintly. Ah, my lord, you also find the accident inconvenient. Lord Vale stared at Poirot. And you are? Hercule Poirot. Recognition stirred. The Belgian, Marjorie sent for you. Lady Marjorie's chin lifted. I could not rest otherwise. Lord Vale's voice sharpened. And what have you found? Poirot spread his hands gently. I have found that everyone in this house has something they prefer not to speak of. Rosamond's lips tightened. Including you, Lord Vale. Lord Vale turned on her. Miss Lee, you are to marry my son. Yes, she said, if he had lived. A silence followed, thick with unspoken meanings. Poirot watched it carefully. Lord Vale exhaled. Where is the body? In the east wing, my lord, Baines murmured. Lord Vale nodded once. I will see him later. Then his gaze moved to Pike. And you, Gerard, you are here for legal matters. Pike stiffened. Yes, my lord. What matters? Poirot interjected softly. Perhaps matters that have now disappeared. Lord Vale's eyes narrowed. Disappeared. Lady Marjorie spoke, her voice controlled. Cyril's papers, drafts, they are missing. For the first time, when something like alarm touched Lord Vale's expression. He masked it instantly, but Poirot's eyes sharpened. "Interesting," Poirot murmured. "Very interesting." Inspector Bryce cleared his throat. "My lord, we are conducting a thorough inquiry, but there is no evidence of foul play." Lord Vale's voice was harsh. "Then find some." Poirot smiled faintly. "Evidence, my lord, is not always a footprint. Sometimes it is a tremor in the voice when one speaks of missing papers." Lord Vale's gaze snapped to Poirot. "Are you implying—" Poirot bowed slightly. "I imply nothing. I observe." Lord Vale's hands clenched. "This house is becoming a circus." "And yet," Poirot said softly, "a circus has clowns, and sometimes a clown hides a knife." Rosamond suddenly spoke, her voice edged. "Lord Vale, so did Cyril tell you he intended to change his will?" Lord Vale's face went rigid. "That is none of your concern." "It is entirely my concern," Rosamond shot back. "If he was murdered, it was because of those changes." Lady Marjorie's voice cut in. "Enough." Poirot lifted a hand. "Mes amis, we circle the same point. The papers, the motive, the fear." He turned to Lord Vale. "My lord, where were you last night?" Lord Vale stiffened. "In London. Alone?" "I was at my club." Poirot nodded thoughtfully. "And when did you last speak with your son?" Lord Vale hesitated. 2 days ago." "And did he tell you of these changes?" Lord Vale's jaw tightened. "Cyril was impulsive." Poirot's voice was mild. "Impulsive men often make enemies, but they also make decisions. Decisions that frighten others." Lord Vale's gaze flickered just once, toward Lady Marjorie. Poirot caught it. At that moment, a maid hurried in, pale and shaking. "Inspector, Monsieur Poirot, there's something else." Bryce snapped. "What now?" The maid swallowed. "In the snow outside the east wing, there are footprints, fresh ones, leading from the chapel door to the garden wall." A collective breath caught. Poirot's eyes shone with quiet triumph. "Ah," he murmured. "So someone did not only steal papers. Someone wished to leave, or to hide something beyond these walls." Inspector Bryce's face hardened. "No one leaves this house." Poirot's smile was faint, almost sad. "Too late, monsieur," he said softly. "Someone already has." The maid's words sent a ripple through the room as though the house itself had shifted. Footprints in the snow were no longer psychological suggestion. They were something tangible, in a trail that could be followed. Inspector Bryce moved at once, barking orders. "No one goes anywhere. Baines, lock the doors. Cook, keep the staff together. If someone has slipped out—" Lord Vale's voice cut through. "Out? From my house?" Poirot's expression remained composed. "My lord, the snow is honest. It shows what the tongue conceals." Within minutes, we were all in the east corridor, lamps casting trembling pools of light along the polished floor. The chapel door stood slightly ajar, as though it too had listened. Outside, the cold struck like a slap. The garden lay under a clean white sheet, unmarred except for a line of footprints curving away from the chapel's side entrance toward the wall. Bryce crouched, examining them. Small feet, a woman's likely. Rosamond's breath caught. Eleanor. Eleanor Shaw stiffened violently. "It wasn't me." Poirot's voice was gentle. "Mademoiselle, do not protest too quickly. Innocence does not always shout." Lady Marjorie's face was pale. "Who then?" Poirot stepped carefully beside the prints, not touching them, merely observing their spacing. "They are hurried," he murmured, not the measured walk of someone taking air. "And see, here the foot slips. The person carried something heavy. Or perhaps—" he glanced toward the wall. "Perhaps the person climbed." Bryce straightened. "We'll follow." The footprints ended at the stone wall where a small gate stood half hidden behind ivy. It was unlatched. Lord Vale's jaw tightened. "That gate is always locked." Baines, hovering anxiously, whispered, "It should be, my lord." Poirot's eyes flicked to him. Should be. Again, the language of negligence. Bryce pushed the gate open. Its beyond lay a narrow lane, snow-packed and empty. "They're gone," Bryce muttered. Poirot nodded slowly. Yes. Someone wished very much not to be found inside when questions became sharper. Rosamond's voice trembled with anger. "Eleanor has done this. She stole the papers and ran." Eleanor's eyes flashed with desperation. "I did not. I have nowhere to run." Poirot turned to her. "And yet someone did. The question is, did they flee with guilt or with fear?" Lady Marjorie whispered, "Monsieur Poirot, you think someone escaped?" Poirot's gaze was distant. "I think someone wished us to believe so. Footprints can be as misleading as words." Inspector Bryce snorted. "Footprints don't lie." Poirot smiled faintly. "No, monsieur, but people make them lie." He turned back toward the chapel. "Inside, please." The chapel was dim, smelling of cold stone and extinguished candles. Poirot moved directly to the candlestand. Several candles had been disturbed. One bent, another shortened unevenly. Poirot's finger brushed the wax. "Recently lit," he murmured. "Someone used a candle last night." "Hastings." My heart beat faster. "To move in shadows?" Poirot nodded. "And perhaps to drip wax upon the banister. A small accident of crime." Bryce's impatience flared. "Enough riddles. If Miss Shaw didn't run, who did?" Poirot's eyes lifted. "Who indeed had reason to create the appearance of flight? To make us chase a phantom while the truth remains in the house?" Lord Vale's voice was sharp. "Are you accusing my staff?" Poirot bowed slightly. "My lord, I accuse no one. But I observe someone stole documents, someone left footprints, someone listened at doors. Now these are not separate acts. They are threads of one tapestry." Rosamond's voice broke. "Cyril is dead. What more tapestry do you need?" Poirot's gaze softened. "Mademoiselle, death is never alone. It always has companions." As we returned to the library, tension coiled tighter. The house felt smaller, its corridors like arteries carrying suspicion. Dr. Fenwick spoke quietly to Poirot. "If someone truly fled, they will freeze in this weather." Poirot's eyes were thoughtful, unless they did not go far. At that moment, Baines approached, pale. "Monsieur Poirot." "Inspector, there is something else." Bryce snapped. "What now?" Baines swallowed. "In Mr. Vale's study, I went to ensure it was secure, and I found this." He held out a small object. A fountain pen, black with gold trim. Its nib was bent. Pike's eyes widened. "That is Cyril's pen." Poirot took it delicately, examining the bend. "It was crushed," he murmured. "In a hand, or under a foot?" Rosamond whispered, "It was on his desk last night." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Then it was broken during a struggle. A fall does not break a pen in a study." Inspector Bryce's face darkened. "So there was a confrontation." Poirot nodded slowly. "Yes, and perhaps the missing papers were the cause." Lord Vale's voice was low, dangerous. "Gerard, what papers?" Pike hesitated. Sweat gleamed faintly at his temple. "My lord, Cyril intended to alter the inheritance. He wished to leave the estate, not to you nor Lady Marjorie." Rosamond leaned forward. "To whom?" Pike's voice faltered. "To Miss Shaw." Silence struck like a gunshot. Eleanor stared as though the world had tilted. "No, that's impossible." Lady Marjorie's hand flew to her mouth. Rosamond's eyes burned. Lord Vale's face became stone. Poirot's voice was soft, almost pitying. "Ah, now we see. The companion was not only in the house, she was in the will." And in that moment, Hastings, I understood. The truth disguised as an accident was beginning to tear open, and beneath it lay something far more intimate than greed. Something like obsession, like betrayal, like love twisted into ruin. The silence that followed Pike's revelation was not empty. It was crowded with shock, outrage, and the sudden rearranging of every motive in the room. Eleanor Shaw stood as though struck, her lips parted, her eyes wide with disbelief. "To me," she whispered. "No, Mr. Pike, you must be mistaken." Pike's voice was strained. "I am not. Mr. Vale was determined." And he said he wished to do something right at last. Rosamond's laugh was sharp as broken glass. Right, leaving everything to his companion. How noble. Lady Marjorie's voice trembled. Cyril never mentioned this. Lord Vale's expression was terrible in its restraint. "Gerard, explain." Pike swallowed. Cyril believed he had wronged Miss Shaw. He intended to provide for her. Eleanor's cheeks flushed. He wronged me. He barely knew me. Poirot's eyes rested on her, gentle yet penetrating. "Mademoiselle, men do not change wills for strangers. There is always a story beneath." Eleanor's hands clenched. "I swear to you, Monsieur Poirot, I asked for nothing. I never—" Rosamond stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "Of course you did. You played the innocent little mouse while he—" "Enough!" Lord Vale snapped, his voice like a whip. The room stilled. "This is madness." Cyril was impulsive but not insane. Poirot murmured softly. "Impulsive men are easily guided." Inspector Bryce cleared his throat. "This changes matters. Miss Shaw, you had the strongest motive." Eleanor recoiled as though slapped. "Motive? Because someone claims Cyril wrote my name on paper?" Poirot raised a hand. "Motive is only the beginning. Opportunity, psychology. These are the keys." He turned to Pike. "Where were these drafts kept?" "In the study drawer, tied with blue ribbon." "And now missing," Poirot murmured. "So someone wished to erase this fact, or perhaps to possess it." Lady Marjorie sank into her chair, her face drawn. "Cyril, why would he do this?" Poirot's voice softened. "Because guilt is a powerful force, madam. Sometimes more powerful than love." Lord Vale's eyes narrowed. Guilt for what?" Poirot did not answer directly. Instead, he looked at Eleanor. "Mademoiselle, last night you heard voices. Did you recognize the second voice?" Eleanor's breath caught. Her gaze flickered toward Lord Vale, then away. I could not be sure." Poirot stepped closer, his tone gentle. "But you are sure now." Her hands trembled. "Monsieur." Poirot's voice was almost kind. "Do not fear. Truth is already in the room. It only waits for courage." Eleanor swallowed hard. "It was a man, low, controlled, angry." Lord Vale's face tightened. Rosamond's eyes flashed. "Lord Vale," Lady Marjorie whispered, horrified. "Stephen?" Lord Vale's voice was cold. "This is absurd. I was in London." Poirot nodded. "Yes, but voices can belong to more than one man. The second voice could be anyone. Yet what interests me more is this. Cyril intended to sign papers last night. He did not. Why? Pike answered reluctantly. He said he was tired, that he would do it in the morning. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Or because someone interrupted. Someone who did not wish him to sign. Inspector Bryce's impatience returned. "Poirot, if you have an accusation, make it." Poirot shook his head. "Not yet. We need one more piece." He turned suddenly toward Baines. The chapel gate was unlatched. "Who has access?" Baines stiffened. "All staff know the grounds, monsieur." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "And the key to the study, on your ring. Yet the papers vanished." Baines' throat worked. "I locked the door, monsieur." Poirot murmured, "Or someone locked it for you." Dr. Fenwick spoke quietly. "Perhaps Cyril himself removed the papers." Poirot smiled faintly. "Dead men do not hide documents." A sharp sound cut through the tension, a muffled thud from above, followed by a faint cry. Everyone froze. Inspector Bryce snapped, "What was that?" Lady Marjorie's face went white. Eleanor's room is above the study. Rosamond's voice was fierce. She's hiding something. Eleanor cried out, "No." Poirot was already moving, swift now despite his usual composure. We hurried up the staircase, the very staircase that had become the house's sinister symbol. The runner lay smooth, innocent, yet I felt its menace. At the upper landing, a maid stood trembling outside a door. "Monsieur Poirot, someone is inside." Poirot pushed past gently and opened it. Eleanor's room was small, neat. A trunk lay open, clothes disturbed, and on the floor, half hidden beneath a shawl, was the blue ribbon. Poirot bent, lifting it delicately. Beneath it lay a bundle of papers. Rosamond gave a triumphant gasp. "There, the thief!" Eleanor staggered forward, tears spilling. "I didn't take them. I swear I didn't." Inspector Bryce seized the papers. "These are the drafts." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "But why are they here?" Eleanor shook violently. "Someone put them there, to trap me." Lord Vale's voice was harsh. "Convenient." Poirot's gaze moved to the window. It was slightly open. Snow dusted the sill. Poirot murmured, almost to himself. Footprints to the wall, papers to the room, a perfect little theatre. He straightened, his eyes suddenly bright. "Dangerous." "The murderer," he said softly, "is not only clever, they are desperate." And as the wind whispered through the cracked window, "Hastings," I knew we were no longer chasing shadows. Now we were standing at the edge of the truth, and someone in this house would do anything to keep it buried. Inspector Bryce held the recovered papers as though they might burn his fingers. Eleanor Shaw stood trembling beside the open trunk, her face streaked with tears, while Rosamond Lee's expression held the hard satisfaction of someone who believes the world has finally aligned against a rival. "Arrest her," Rosamond said sharply. "She stole them. She killed him." Eleanor's voice broke. "No, I didn't." Lady Marjorie looked as though she might faint. "Rosamond, please." Lord Vale's eyes were cold. "Inspector, this is conclusive enough. The drafts in her room—" Poirot's voice cut through, gentle but absolute. "None, my lord. It is conclusive only of one thing. Someone wishes very much for it to appear conclusive." Bryce scowled. "Poirot." Oh, the papers were missing. "Now they are here." Poirot nodded. "Yes, and the window is open. The snow on the sill is fresh. Someone entered, or wished us to believe they entered." Bryce snapped. "Are you suggesting a phantom climbed into her room?" Poirot's eyes were bright. "Not a phantom. A person with opportunity. A person who understands theatre." Rosamond's laugh was bitter. "Theatre? She's the actress." Poirot turned to her slowly. "Mademoiselle Lee, you accuse with such certainty. Tell me, do you enjoy certainty?" Rosamond's lips tightened. "I enjoy justice." Poirot inclined his head. "Justice requires patience." He stepped closer to Eleanor. "Mademoiselle, when did you last see these papers?" Eleanor sobbed. "This morning, when you opened the drawer. I didn't touch them." Poirot nodded. "No, and since then?" "I've been with Lady Marjorie, mostly. I went to my room only once to fetch a shawl. The trunk was closed then." Poirot's gaze flickered to the trunk. Closed, and now open. Inspector Bryce muttered, "Convenient." Poirot ignored him. He bent, examining the trunk's latch. "No sign of forcing," he murmured. "Someone with familiarity. Someone who knows the rooms." Lady Marjorie whispered, "Everyone knows the rooms." Poirot smiled faintly. "Not equally, madame." He straightened and looked at Baines, who stood rigid in the doorway. "Baines, who cleans here?" "One of the maids, monsieur." "And who has keys?" Poirot pressed. Baines hesitated. "The housekeeper keeps most, monsieur, but—" His voice faltered. "Staff may enter with permission." Poirot nodded thoughtfully. "Permission, or assumption." Inspector Bryce's patience snapped. We cannot ignore evidence because you dislike its neatness. Miss Shaw had motive. She stood to inherit. Eleanor cried out, "I didn't even know." Poirot's voice softened. "That is true. Surprise is difficult to counterfeit." Rosamond's eyes flashed. She could pretend. Poirot's gaze sharpened. "And you, mademoiselle, could you pretend grief? Could you pretend love?" Rosamond stiffened. "How dare you?" Poirot's tone remained polite. "I dare only to ask questions." Lord Vale stepped forward, dangerous anger in his restraint. "Poirot, my son is dead. I will not have this turned into a parlour game." Poirot bowed slightly. "My lord, it is not a game. It is a tragedy, and tragedies are written by human weaknesses." He turned back to the papers in Bryce's hand. "Inspector, may I?" Bryce hesitated, then thrust them forward. Poirot took them delicately, not reading but studying the ribbon. "This ribbon," he murmured. "It was tied tightly this morning. Now it is loose. Someone untied it. Someone read." Pike's face tightened. "Naturally. If stolen—" Poirot's eyes flicked to him. "Did you read them, Mr. Pike?" Pike stiffened. "No, they were drafts. I already knew their contents." Poirot nodded slowly. "And who else knew?" Silence. Rosamond's voice was sharp. "No one. Cyril told me only that he intended changes." Lord Vale's jaw tightened. "Gerard told me nothing." Lady Marjorie whispered. "I knew nothing." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Then the thief did not steal blindly. They stole with purpose." A sudden thought struck me. "Poirot, if someone planted the papers here, they wanted Eleanor blamed." Poirot nodded. "Is exactly, mon ami. A scapegoat is always useful when one fears exposure." Inspector Bryce muttered. "Exposure of what?" Poirot's gaze grew distant. Of the true motive, not inheritance alone, something more intimate. Eleanor suddenly spoke, her voice trembling. Cyril was cruel." Everyone turned. She swallowed hard, tears shining. "He tormented people. He liked power. He told me he could ruin Lady Marjorie, that he had proof." Lady Marjorie gasped. "Eleanor!" Lord Vale's eyes narrowed. "Proof of what?" Eleanor's voice broke. "I don't know. He wouldn't say, only that she would obey him." Poirot's eyes sharpened like a blade. "Blackmail." Rosamond whispered. "Cyril was blackmailing his stepmother." Lady Marjorie's face was deathly pale. "That is nonsense." Poirot's voice was gentle, almost pitying. "Madame, nonsense is as often what we call truth when it is unbearable." Inspector Bryce exhaled harshly. "Now we have it. Blackmail, stolen papers, planted evidence. This is no accident." Poirot nodded slowly. "No, monsieur. It is murder wrapped carefully in the clothes of accident." He looked around the small room, at the open window, the disturbed trunk, the trembling girl. "And now," he murmured, "the murderer knows we are close. So they will strike again, or they will break." As if summoned by his words, a scream rang out from downstairs, sudden and piercing. Lady Marjorie swayed. Rosamond clutched the banister. Inspector Bryce cursed and ran. Poirot's eyes flashed with grim certainty. "Come," he said softly. "The house has not finished with death." We hurried down the staircase, the very heart of the house's dark drama. Thus the scream echoed still, vibrating through corridors that seemed suddenly narrower, more suffocating. Inspector Bryce was already ahead, his boots striking the steps with harsh urgency. Poirot followed with controlled speed, his face set in grim concentration. At the foot of the stairs, Cook stood in the hall, white as linen, one hand pressed to her mouth. "It's Dr. Fenwick," she whispered. "In the billiard room?" A cold weight settled in my chest. We pushed through the double doors. The billiard room was lit by a single lamp, casting the green table into eerie relief. Dr. Alistair Fenwick lay sprawled near the fireplace, his body twisted unnaturally. A poker lay nearby, stained dark. Lady Marjorie's voice broke into a sob. Rosamond gasped, her hands flying to her throat. Inspector Bryce knelt beside the doctor, her fingers pressed briefly to the pulse. He looked up, his face hard. Dead. Poirot's eyes closed for a fraction of a second, as though in sorrow rather than surprise. When he opened them, they were sharp. "How long?" Bryce demanded. Baines answered stiffly. "Cook found him moments ago, sir. She came to lay the tea tray." Bryce swore. "This is no accident. This is murder." Poirot murmured softly. "Yes, the murderer grows desperate." Lord Vale's voice was cold fury. "In my house. Twice." Rosamond whispered, trembling, "Why Fenwick?" Poirot stepped closer, studying the doctor's body with that peculiar detachment that was not cruelty but intellect. "He knew something," Poirot said quietly. Inspector Bryce snapped, "Or he was about to tell you something." Poirot nodded. "Perhaps." He crouched, examining the doctor's hand, and Fenwick's fingers were clenched around a scrap of paper crumpled tight. Poirot's eyes gleamed. With delicate care, he pried it free. Bryce leaned in. "What is it?" Poirot unfolded the scrap slowly. It bore only a few words, hastily scrawled, "Bannister, Wax, Baines." A silence fell heavier than any scream. Baines stiffened, his face draining. "Monsieur?" Inspector Bryce surged to his feet. "You!" Poirot raised a hand. "Wait, monsieur. The doctor wrote this before he died. It is important, but it is not yet proof." Lord Vale's gaze was like steel. "Baines, explain yourself." Baines' throat worked. "I have served this family 20 years, my lord. I would never—" Rosamond's voice was sharp. "Then why does Fenwick name you?" Poirot's tone was gentle. Perhaps because Baines was the one who carried the candle, or perhaps because someone wished Fenwick to suspect him. Inspector Bryce barked, "Enough, Baines, you are under arrest." Baines swayed slightly. "Inspector, please." Poirot stepped forward, voice calm but commanding. "No, not yet. If you arrest too quickly, you give the murderer exactly what they desire. Chaos." Bryce's face flushed. "Another murder has occurred under your nose." Poirot's eyes flashed. "Yes, because the murderer wishes to stop the little grey cells from thinking." Lady Marjorie's voice trembled. "Monsieur Poirot, what does it mean?" Poirot looked at the paper again. "It means Dr. Fenwick realized something. Perhaps about the wax. Perhaps about the staircase. Perhaps about the butler's access." Lord Vale's jaw tightened. Or perhaps Fenwick was blackmailing someone too. Poirot's gaze sharpened. Blackmail. Yes, and we return always to that word. He turned slowly to Lady Marjorie. "Madame, Cyril said he could ruin you. Did he?" Lady Marjorie's face went rigid. "No." Poirot's voice was soft, almost kind. "Madame, 2 men are dead. Lies now are very expensive." Her hands trembled. For a long moment she said nothing. Then, in a voice barely audible, she whispered, "He threatened to reveal that my marriage was not what it seemed. That Stephen—" She glanced at Lord Vale, anguish breaking through composure. "That Stephen's fortune was built on something dishonorable." Lord Vale's face darkened. "Marjorie." Poirot nodded slowly. "So Cyril held power over you, power that could destroy reputation." Rosamond whispered, "Then you had motive." Lady Marjorie cried out, "I did not kill him." Poirot's gaze was steady. "Motive, yes, but motive is common. A murder is rarer." Inspector Bryce exhaled harshly. "Poirot, the house is a powder keg." Poirot's voice was calm. "Then we must not strike matches blindly." He looked around the billiard room, at Fenwick's broken body, at the poker, at the paper. The murderer killed Fenwick because Fenwick discovered something, and Fenwick wrote Baines's name because Baines was connected to the staircase. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "But the murderer," he murmured, "is not Baines." Bryce snapped, "How can you be sure?" Poirot's smile was faint, grim. "Because," he said softly, "Baines is too obvious, and the murderer's greatest talent has been disguise." Outside, the snow continued to fall, silent and relentless, covering footprints, covering truth. And within the house, fear tightened like a noose. Ardent for Poirot was drawing near the final gathering, and the killer knew it. The night settled heavily over Hercule Poirot, and the truth disguised as an accident, as though the house itself waited for judgment. Snow pressed against the windows, muffling the world beyond, sealing us into our closed circle of suspicion. 2 men were dead. One truth remained hidden. Poirot requested with quiet firmness that everyone gather in the morning library. Inspector Bryce stood near the hearth, arms folded, his face grim. Lord Vale sat rigid, anger held like a weapon. Lady Marjorie's composure was shattered into pale exhaustion. Rosamond's eyes burned with restless fury. Pike looked ill. Eleanor Shaw sat trembling, hands clasped tightly. Baines stood stiff as carved wood. Poirot entered last, immaculate as ever, his moustaches precise, his eyes bright with that terrible clarity. "Mes amis," he began softly, "we have reached the moment when the truth can no longer hide behind accidents, behind missing papers, behind footprints in snow." Bryce snapped, "Then speak it." Poirot inclined his head. "Yes. Let us begin with the staircase. Cyril Vale did not fall by chance. The runner was firm, the rod secure, yet wax was found upon the banister." Baines swallowed. Poirot continued, "A candle was carried into the hall. Why? Not for light. Lamps were burning. No, a candle is for shadow, for softness, for concealment." Rosamond whispered, "So someone waited for him." Poirot nodded. "Yes, Cyril was in his study. He argued with someone. A pen was broken, proof of struggle. Then he was lured or forced toward the stairs." Lord Vale's voice was harsh. Who forced him?" Poirot's eyes moved slowly across the faces. "Someone with motive beyond money. Someone with fear." He turned to Pike. "The will drafts were to leave the estate to Miss Shaw. That is extraordinary. Why would Cyril do such a thing?" Eleanor whispered, "I didn't know." Poirot's gaze softened. "You did not. Cyril was not acting from love. He was acting from guilt. He had wronged you, mademoiselle, used his power, his cruelty, and then sought to make amends with money." Rosamond's face twisted. "He was disgusting." Poirot nodded. "Yes, and that guilt gave someone else an opportunity. The drafts were stolen, then planted in Eleanor's room. A perfect trap. Footprints were made to suggest flight. Theatre, always theatre." Bryce growled. "And Fenwick?" Poirot's voice sharpened. Dr. Fenwick realized the truth about the wax. He suspected Baines because Baines had access, keys, knowledge. The murderer killed Fenwick before he could speak. Baines cried, "Monsieur, I swear." Poirot raised a hand. "Baines is innocent of murder. He carried the candle, yes, but not to kill." All eyes snapped to the butler. Baines' face crumpled slightly. Lady Marjorie asked me." Lady Marjorie gasped. "Baines." Poirot nodded gently. "Madame wished to speak with Cyril privately, without the harsh glare of lamps. She feared what he might say. She feared blackmail." Lord Vale's voice thundered. "Marjorie!" Lady Marjorie's voice broke. "He was threatening me. He said he would ruin us." Poirot's eyes were grave. "And so you asked Baines for discretion. But you did not kill Cyril. You only gave the murderer the perfect setting." Rosamond leaned forward. "Then who?" Poirot turned slowly, his gaze settling at last on one figure. "Lord Vale." A shock ran through the room. Lord Vale's face became stone. "You are mad." Poirot's voice was calm. "No, my lord. You arrived suddenly, alarmed at missing papers. You feared what Cyril intended. Not only inheritance. No, you feared exposure." Lord Vale's eyes flashed. "Exposure of what?" Poirot's tone was soft, merciless. "Of dishonor. Cyril had discovered the truth of your fortune, the scandal that would destroy the family name. He blackmailed Lady Marjorie, yes, but he also threatened you." Bryce barked. "But he was in London." Poirot nodded. "So you say. Yet you returned too quickly, and your club alibi is thin. More importantly, Cyril did not die at 11 by chance. He died because someone knew he would sign papers that night. Someone who could not allow it." Rosamond whispered. "Stephen." Lord Vale's voice trembled with rage. "You have no proof." Poirot smiled faintly. "Ah, but we have psychology. You are a man obsessed with control, with order. Your son was chaos. He threatened to tear apart everything you built." Lord Vale's hands clenched. "He was my son." Poirot's eyes gleamed, "and you hated him for it." Silence fell like snow. Poirot continued softly. "You came earlier than expected. You slipped into the house by the chapel gate, leaving footprints. You confronted Cyril in the study. The pen broke. You forced him toward the stairs. The candle's wax marked the banister. One push, one terrible moment, and it became an accident." Lady Marjorie whispered, "No." Poirot's voice hardened. "Then you stole the drafts, planted them to frame Eleanor, and killed Fenwick when he began to see." Inspector Bryce stepped forward, eyes blazing. "Lord Vale." Lord Vale's composure shattered. His face twisted with despair and fury. "You think you understand?" he hissed. "He would have destroyed us, everything, the name, the estate. I could not let him." Poirot's voice was almost sorrowful. "So you chose murder, and murder always destroys more." Lord Vale sagged as though suddenly old. "It was meant to be simple, a fall, an accident." Poirot nodded. "But truth does not stay disguised forever." Inspector Bryce moved, placing a hand on Lord Vale's arm. Lord Vale did not resist. His eyes were empty. Rosamond turned away, shaking. Lady Marjorie wept silently. Eleanor stared as though waking from a nightmare. Poirot looked at me, Hastings with quiet melancholy. "You see, mon ami," he murmured. "It is always the same. The little grey cells reveal that the greatest crimes are born not of mystery, but of human weakness." Outside, snow continued to fall, covering the footprints at last. But inside, the truth stood clear, no longer hidden beneath the mask of accident. Poirot straightened his cuffs, impeccable even in tragedy. "And now," he said softly, "justice comes, as it must."